The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
And the gang are back, episode 29 of the Silly Goose Gang Podcast, and we're joined tonight by Alan Smith, who is the co-owner of Discovery Wrestling, one of the big wrestling promotions based out of Edinburgh. So, Alan, thanks very much for joining us.
No, pleasure. Anytime someone asks me to speak about disco, I'm only too willing, so I appreciate the invite.
Nice. Thanks very much for joining in. One of the things that I'd forgot, and again, I didn't know this, and we were just talking off air, the fact I've been to a few events, and you're kind of known as the guy who does the raffle at disco. So we thought we'd get a dive behind the man that does the raffle. Because I only found out when I was doing a bit of research on this, did you start as like an in-ring guy originally? Before
so... I mean, I wrestled for a few years for a different company, obviously, and that's how I got into it. I mean, I had a couple of false starts from wrestling. I always loved wrestling my entire life. You know, a lot of people kind of grow out of it as soon as they become like teenagers or whatever. A lot of folk kind of go out, it's just for kids. But I was always, hooked on wrestling from a young age. Talking kind of late 80s is when I first started watching wrestling. I can still remember the first time. My family, we got Sky TV, and it was a big exciting thing. We got Sky and flicking through all the channels to see what we got, and we flicked onto, and it was wrestling, and it was Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan were both doing promos like just one after the other, and we'd never seen wrestling before in our lives, me and my big brother. And as soon as we seen Ultimate Warrior, we were just like, what is this? I'm about 6 or 7 years old. And then Hulk Hogan comes on the television. And for some reason, we recognised who Hulk Hogan was. We've seen him somewhere. And we're just like, oh, there's that boxing guy. I don't know, maybe it was from the Rocky movies or something. I don't know. But, we saw that. And then, I was hooked on wrestling ever since. So a lot of people around me knew I was a big wrestling fan. I tried a couple of training schools that didn't work out. And then probably when I was about 25. My day job is I work on the radio, and as my day job. I'm a newsreader. Well, I used to be a newsreader, and I was working for a radio station, and there was a local promoter had come into the radio station and said, "Look, we've got a big event coming up. We've got no marketing budget. How can we get talked about in the radio?" And our breakfast presenter knew that I was a big wrestling fan, and said, "Our news guy loves wrestling. Why don't you train him up, stick him in a match, and we'll talk about it on the radio?" And then that was it. It was only ever supposed to be one match. I ended up wrestling for a few years, and then had ideas of setting up something myself. My own ideas of how wrestling could be, and then that's the kind of journey I took.
Nice.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's an interesting. Like I think. I think we're all round about the same age. I think everybody our age grew up watching the WWF in the 80s and 90s. The Ultimate Warrior and all these guys. They were still watch them from time to time on YouTube. But so yeah, I think we all had that thing. But it's a cool way to get into it. Like a complete. That's like a fate thing. That's a fate thing to me. It's one of those things where it was just kind of supposed to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I tried a couple of training schools, and I just didn't stick at it. It was one or two sessions at training schools, and then I remember my first ever training session I'd gone through to the west of Scotland, and it was an 8-hour training session, and then the whole time you were just doing bumps. Essentially you're learning how to fall safely, and how to protect yourself as you fall. But even at that, it's not like you're landing on a big cushion or a trampoline, or it was a really thin gym mats that you'll probably remember from high school or from primary school. They're really thin mats, and you're having to throw yourself backwards on these thin mats, and that was for 8 hours. And I remember the next day getting up for work, and I couldn't move, like my whole body, like my neck, everything. It was like just I could not move, and I thought, well, maybe this isn't for me. So there was times I did try a couple of training schools because I was really keen on doing it, and then after my second kind of false start, I'd kind of given up. I thought, well, wrestling's not for me. I'm not going to push myself to do this. I'll just keep enjoying it from afar. And then that came about. The breakfast presenter saying, "Hey, look, we've got this idea for you. You're going to train to be a wrestler, and you're going to be in a match, and you've got 3 months between now and the match. And I was like, okay. So, but that gave me a goal to stick with it, because there was a lot of people listening. You know, it's a big show that I was part of, and I knew that if I'd given up after 2 or 3 training sessions, then how do I look? You know, and it's almost kind of driven by the fear of failure. So I was just like, no, I've got to make this work. I'm going to do it. And like I say, it was supposed to be one match, but I really enjoyed it. You know, the buzz off the crowd, you know, when you come out and you're making your entrance and you've got family there, you've got friends there. And it was just awesome to kind of be in front of a crowd doing all of that. And the match went well. A lot of the wrestlers were chuffed. You know, this person who's come in and did a good job, didn't make a mockery out of what they were doing. So I thought, you know, I'll stick with it. You know, I'll see how far this goes. So so I wrestled for about 5 years, not to any sort of kind of great success or great degree. You know, I'm quite happy to look back on my time as a wrestler and go, I was a very terrible wrestler. You know, I was awful. But at the same time, I always got a good interaction with the crowd. You know, I always had a good connection with the crowd, which is obviously one of the most important things in wrestling. You know, you could be the best, most talented wrestler in the world, but if the crowd don't care, then, you know, they don't care. And that's the whole point of wrestling. Is it's not so much you're wrestling with your opponent to win a match. You basically, it's you and your opponent are fighting with the crowd to try and get the crowd to care about what happens in your match. So, albeit I was a terrible wrestler, I was able to have a good connection with the crowd, that they were actually interested in the things I was doing. So, but I'm much happier now being behind the curtain than I was being in the ring.
Was there any? Did you have any like previous like entertainment things, or did you sing or play guitar or anything? Or was it just something that naturally you found you liked?
No, I just well, I think like a lot of people, when you're in high school, you join a band, you're in a band and things, and I fronted a band for a few years, so I always enjoyed entertaining folk. You know, I was quite extroverted in a way, in the way that I like to. I just like to enjoy myself, and if I can bring others into that enjoyment, I get a kick out of that. So I've always had that kind of need almost to kind of entertain. But now doing disco the way we're doing it, like that, I get a much bigger buzz out of, you know, basically producing and putting a whole event together than just going out and wrestling for 10 minutes, you know, because you want the whole event to kind of run slick and to be as entertaining as possible, so that when people are leaving and going home, you see the feedback online, you see how much people have enjoyed it, and that's when you get the real kick out of it. You go, you know, we've done a great job, and people have got what they've paid for, and they've loved it, and they'll come back.
Totally. I think that's so true what you're saying about the crowd. I remember, as I say, I'm a massive wrestling fan, similar to yourself, Alan. I started watching when we got Sky as well, when my dad had been out in the... I think he'd been out in the Gulf. He was in the Navy and he came back and he'd seen all the channels where the British forces broadcasting at the time. We got Sky, started watching it. But years later, like I'm now a dad now with my kids, and my middle kid, my youngest lad, Logan, who's the one that comes to disco events with me, he's a huge wrestling fan. And we'd been watching it one day, and it'd been on for 4 or 5 weeks, WWE on like Raw and everything. And my missus had been saying she had no real interest in wrestling, and Chris Jericho had came back from one of his spells away, and he was doing one of his, I can't remember what gimmick he was doing, and his music hit, and my missus went, "Oh, he annoys me so much, that guy." And I was like, "He's got you," and she's like, "What do you mean? Like, I hate him. That's not." And I was like, "That is the good, because
that's his role.
You don't watch it, but you've still got into your brain that this guy," because he was playing a heel character at the time. I think it might have been when he had the list and all that kind of gimmick.
Right, okay.
Was doing it like, and she was like, "I hate him. He's so arrogant. He's so annoying." And I was like, "He's got you without even that's how good." Like, obviously, Jeff was an absolute legend, but it's interesting that even, you know, at a lower level, with all respect, you were able to do that and get the crowd to do what you needed to do.
Yeah. I think it doesn't matter the kind of size of the crowd, because I've wrestled in front of like some terrible numbers. I've wrestled in venues where there's been like 6 people. You know, this is going back. You know, like obviously now wrestling over the last few years has been incredible in the UK in terms of the crowd numbers, the quality of wrestling as well now is so much better than it was perhaps 10 years ago. But even if you're wrestling in front of like 6 people, you still go out and you do what you can. You still throw yourself around like there's 1,000 people, and you still try and latch onto those people there, even if there are just 6 people in the crowd. You want them still to react to something you do.
Yeah. Do you not think? Do you not think that, like, for somebody to do well, before you become Vince McMahon, you've had to have paid your dues in front of 6 people, because if you don't, you can't understand. The job, like you're saying, you still have to entertain them. So I think, with everything, not just wrestling, I think you have to have paid your dues in the not very nice places and work your way up, and then understand how to build things and push forward and interact and then move forward. Do you think that's? I think that you have to have done it.
I think it certainly helps with kind of character building within yourself. Knowing that even if you wrestled, as what a lot of people are doing just now without a crowd, that you're gonna give it your all, and it's just how you interact with your environment. I mean, there are a lot of wrestlers these days who don't go through that journey of wrestling in small independent promotions where there's perhaps not a crowd, and they're building themselves up, because you see things where WWE has its development centers and performance centers where that they're scouting people who've played American football or done this sport or that sport, who've never wrestled in front of a wee crowd. They get into the performance center and then they just train up that way. Then all of a sudden they wrestle in front of like not bad sized crowds. So I think it's definitely changed over the years. The fact that there are now these performance centers happening, that people can go straight from not having ever wrestled in front of a crowd to then wrestling in front of a decent sized audience. But I do think there is that the people that you see doing best within wrestling and reaching the heights are all wrestlers who've been in those situations where they've wrestled in some maybe terrible venues with no crowd, and I think a lot of that is it does help build your character, not a character but your character.
Yeah, it's similar to being in a band, of course. When you're in a band at school and there's 14 people there. That's you have to. I always feel anyway that somebody has to have kind of done that stuff to really build their own character and push forward. I think it builds a more complete kind of understanding of what they're doing.
I think for fans as well. I think fans appreciate someone's journey too.
Yeah.
So I think if you're able to tell that story of, well, look, this is where I started and this is what I went through in order to be where I am, I think there's people then have this deeper appreciation for like, yeah, he's been through some terrible places in order to get where he is. And I think people, like I say, if you look at some of the people who've been the top of the wrestling business over the last 20 years, the real standouts, they've all kind of gone through that kind of process. Well, I wouldn't say all, but most have gone through that kind of journey.
Yeah, and even within Disco Logan particularly, he's 17 now. But again, when he started coming, I think 3 years ago was the first time he went. So he was like that 14 age where he was still proper crazy into the wrestling before Birds and Boo started to take over a wee bit. But like he remembers seeing like guys that are now on like NXT UK. And even he's like, I saw them, and like, I can't believe, like, I've had a high five off him. Yeah. Like, as being sat ringside and they come out, and Logan's leaning over I'm not lying, sometimes I am as well. I'm not even going to he's like leaning the hand out, like, high five, got a high five of Joe Coffey.
That's the great thing about independent events, independent promotions, is you do get right close to the action. I love the size of events we do. I like the, it's if you're at the Jam House, you're maybe 250, 300 people there. Granted, the Corniche, we've done some Corniche Exchange events where we've had like 1,000 people there, but those events where you feel like you are part of it, you are that close to the action. That's what I really love, because you kind of feed off the energy of the crowd, and the crowd get that close to the wrestlers that when they do get to a point where, for example, Big Killian Dane and Ricochet and all these guys who've been at disco events in the past, and all of a sudden you're turning on and you're going, oh, there's Ricochet on Raw, there's Killian Dane doing this thing, there's There's Matt Riddle's now on SmackDown. And you're thinking all these guys have wrestled with us and have been, all our crowd have had their pictures taken with these people and met them, and now they're kind of taking over the world. And so even for me as a promoter and a co-owner of a business like this, it's pretty cool to think someone who's now like people who are now like the most famous wrestlers on the planet have come through our way en route to doing that. So there is a kind of buzz factor in that.
It must be quite a cool feeling to see somebody, wrestling for the biggest organization in the world. And you go,
yeah. Well, even
for me, it's cool.
Even seeing MVP back on Raw, like MVP was with us in November. Do you know he wrestled for us in November, like in front of 300 people at the Jam House, and then fast forward a couple of months, now he's one of the main guys on Raw. Like he's on the mic all the time on Raw, and you're just thinking, God, like just a few months ago, we were heading out after the show for a couple of drinks in Edinburgh, and now you're back on Raw amongst the elite of it all. On the biggest company in the world. It's just sometimes wrestling's just so strange how things just seem to happen and work out. I mean, even like Sugar Dunkerton wrestled with us a handful of times last year, and went back to America, and I think he was unsure of what was kind of next. He had his goals and his aims. Then all of a sudden, there he is as Pineapple Pete every week on AEW, and you're just thinking, God, it's amazing just how things work out sometimes for people.
Yeah. Even talking AEW, obviously, I think possibly the last event I was at where Logie was when you had Cody, Marty, and the Young Bucks, and now that's real AEW, which is pushing all the way to become certainly the next big major promotion just behind WWE. Some of the talent they've picked up, and I saw today that there's rumours that they're trying to get Punk back in.
Yeah, you see rumours all the time, and anytime CM Punk's name's mentioned, there's going to be a link somewhere to someone and talks.
Thank God it's not in the MMA.
To give him his due, at least he tried.
He gave it a go.
I think there's like obviously different schools of thought. I think wrestling fans like myself are like, good on him. He gave it a try. He got battered, but you know what? He stuck it out for a couple of fights. Whereas I think a lot of MMA fans are like, bugger off back to wrestling. You're not cut out for this. So
the difference being, me and Ali both do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I came from a boxing background. So when somebody comes from, wrestling and they're saying they're going to give MMA a chance, you're going, you should really have some amateur fights, because this is somebody's going to try and punch a hole in your face. So at least when Brock Lesnar done it, Brock had he was a legitimate savage.
He was NCAA, wasn't he? Yeah,
he's a legitimate savage. He had that background, but CM Punk didn't. But he went and gave it a go, and at least he could say he tried. So yeah, that's cool. But it was one of those things where he was so far out of his depth. Gave it a go.
Chris says he hadn't done his dues in front of the 6 people fighting.
He hadn't paid his dues. He should have done some amateur fights, and then early on he might have went, I need to work a lot harder, or I need to spend a lot more time, or he would have went, this is not for me. And he went from WWE straight into the UFC, and it didn't go particularly well. But he made some money and had some fun, I'm sure. So
well, that's it. I'm sure he made UFC a lot of money as well. So
definitely.
So for Dana White, it's kind of what's he lost from all of this? Has he lost any credibility from having CM Punk in these couple of cards? He's like going credibility.
Dana White, in terms of being a promoter, is a genius. Dana White does not put losers on his card. He done it for a reason. He knew he was going to get the crossover fans, and that's why he did it. So it was super smart from him. But fair enough. He went and done it. He made money, and
but then you see it going the other way. You see a lot of MMA fighters who are now in WWE and doing Matt Riddle was obviously tough enough many moons ago. Ronda Rousey and then a few others. There's a few others certainly within the female division of women who've come over from doing MMA and rocked up and are just killing it in professional wrestling.
Even Tyson Fury going over there having a match with Braun Strowman, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite funny. But that's again, it's all about the cross promotion, and at the end of the day, it's an entertainment business, isn't it? And getting people in to watch it.
If for us with Disco, if we saw there was a Scottish fighter who was taking over the world, we would be silly not to kind of go, hey, look, do you want to come to one of our events? And
I bet you that somebody would be willing to do it. I
Yeah.
guarantee there's an MMA fighter or a boxer out there that would be like, I could do that.
Yeah.
Go and have some fun. I guarantee you. I think me and Ali should make it a mission to try and find you somebody that will come over and do something for you.
Oh yeah, if there's someone from Scotland taking over the world that has that profile, then of course we would be like, yeah, let's see what we can do. I mean, sometimes you see folk out with wrestling who turn out to be wrestling fans or have done something on social media, and you're just thinking, God, we could try and hook them in. I remember there was a video of, what was it, Jason Cummings from Hibs when he was at Hibs at the time in Grado, having a brawl about the changing room at Hibs and stuff, and then you're thinking, well, there's a footballer based in Edinburgh, there's a wrestling promotion in Edinburgh, but sometimes those are the kind of things that they're a bit of fun, and they're a bit of fun that bring a bit of attention to what you do, and so who knows? I mean, I've even seen like Grant Holt, was it the former
he's
Norwich striker?
Norwich, he went in one of the camps, didn't he?
Yeah, he ended up wrestling from a promotion down south, in Norwich, obviously. So you never know what happens with the wrestling, and then it's amazing when you find out who's fans.
Are these things that you've always got your ears and eyes open, kind of looking for people who may be interested in for a show? I know you've got an anniversary show coming up, don't you? If that's happening.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't see us having any event this year, which is gutting. Just there's so many uncertainties in terms of, even if we went right, okay, let's do it, let's schedule it for November, and then you start putting tickets on sale, then you find out come November, or even when you get close to November, it's not going to be possible. Then you've kind of taken folks' money without a guarantee of having an event, which is not what we want to do. So I'm just trying to be as patient as I can. We're all itching to have events again, and it's frustrating, but it is what it is. You can't really have a wrestling event a wrestling match without there's social distancing, because I know a lot of people have their views on wrestling and whatever else, but I think if you did a match with a meter between folk as they're doing moves, really gives the game away. So
we're having that same issue as well. As Chris says, we do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the whole point of that game is to get rid of as much space as possible. So similar to your with the wrestling, we don't know how it's going to look when it all comes back open. You can't really Jiu-Jitsu. It turns into one of those McDojo things where I'll use my chi energy shield to knock you over. It just doesn't really work.
I mean, we've spoken with venues, particularly the Edinburgh Con Exchange, because we were supposed to have 2 events with them. Where they've put in measures. I've spoken with them about how we can do an event with social distance in terms of the crowd and the increased hygiene and all of this type of stuff. But the big concern for us is, how do you guarantee a wrestler's safety? We're not a Premier League football club who can test wrestlers twice a week. It's just impossible as a small company. So we're all just kind of waiting to see how it goes, and we'll be like you guys. It'll just be waiting for word on how contact sports can begin again, because we'll be in the same boat. We're in absolutely the same boat, So we're just looking to see what they say about MMA and about boxing and whatnot. But it could be a long time.
Is there no way you could at least have an event, empty arena with streamed on Facebook or live on YouTube? Is there any way you could do something like that?
That's possible, but again, it comes down to keeping your own wrestlers safe. Unless you're, unless temperature checks, is the way forward, and they think that's the safest way to guarantee it. So you've got someone there that can check everyone's temperature as they show up, or do they have to go for weekly tests themselves? So they're turning up and saying, "Hey, look, here's my results I got yesterday. I'm COVID free, so I could get in the ring and wrestle with someone." Who knows? We're now at a point in Scotland where the number of cases are so low, and the infection rate is so low in Scotland just now that you're just sitting there going, God, I hope people just stick with this, because Scotland's close to virtually eliminating this thing. And if Scotland got rid of it and it was eliminated, then maybe we don't have the social distance. Maybe we could get back to doing contact sports and wrestling and whatnot. So from a purely selfish point of view, for me, it's just I would just want people just to not take the piss with all this stuff opening up again.
Yeah.
Just while we're talking about the stars that you've had, how, and again, this is something that me and Chris are obviously continually chasing to get guests on, and we've had some mad guests over the course of the last few months. How easy is it as a promoter to get those kind of names? You know, you've thrown some names out there, the likes of MVP, Cody Rhodes, Marty Scurll, the Young Bucks. We saw Jay Lethal and Juve Guerrero at one point as well. You know, How easy is it to get a hold of them, get them to agree to come over? Again, not talking in terms of cash or anything, not wanting you to disclose that, but just the process, I guess, and how you're getting those guys over to Edinburgh.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the kind of folks like Cody Rhodes and the Bucks and you know, they'll all have their agents and things who we'll know, and we'll just approach them and just ask the question and just go, right, you know, we're putting on a date around this, you know, we're putting on a big event around this date. Are they available? If so, would they be interested? What do we need to do to make this work? And then you just kind of work towards that. It's just, you know, you just work with their agents, or a lot of them don't have agents. A lot of them you just email direct. You know, they have their email addresses out there for you just to email them direct, and you just hope they respond. But it gets easier for us as the years go on because of reputation. I remember our first ever event, which would have been close to 6 years ago, at Meadowbank in Edinburgh. You know, we're reaching out to a lot of top names, and obviously they can Google you and go, these people have never done an event before, these people have never put on a show before. Like, we risk taking a date there, and that show might not happen, and they've turned down dates elsewhere. So a lot of people put their trust in us to deliver at the first event because they knew nothing of us. So, you know, we did have on our first event, we had Crime Time, we had Chris Sabin, we had Mike Mondo, who was in the Spirit Squad, you know, and those guys, you know, thankfully accepted the dates with us, and it all worked out because, you know, it was their profile that essentially we were banking on to get our name out there. So thankfully they kind of had a bit of faith or a bit of trust in what we were doing. But as the years go on, your reputation grows, and people, you know, we always try and make sure people are very well treated when they come to Discovery, in terms of the professional setup to everything from the travel, how they're looked after within Edinburgh, and so that way when they go away, they can tell other people and say, you should check out Discovery. They treat people really well, and then before you know it, it kind of reverses in the way that instead of us chasing people to work with us, we then have people messaging us saying, I want to work with you. Can we make this happen? So that's kind of built up over time, and that's where the kind of hard work and the professionalism goes, is just to build that reputation.
It's funny when you know, just listen to you describing that, Alan. It's funny because it's almost exactly what we did 4 months ago when we decided to do this in lockdown. And you're going, probably nobody will speak to us because we're not anything. And then now it's like last night we spoke to Kelly Pavlik, who was the middleweight champion of the world 2008, and it's like, we can't believe it. So now it's went from a bit like, you know, Discovery's 5 years old. Are you 5 years old?
Yeah, coming up for 6. Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's still a short space of time, and, you know, in the grand scheme of things. So it's, you know, what you're describing is what we've just went through to do this, and it's really, you know, and I think it's so cool to see somebody who goes and, you know, they try and do things the right way. They try and set things up properly and be nice and courteous and try and create a nice atmosphere around everything. And it's cool to see somebody getting success.
Yeah, that's really important. I think, you know, to just to treat people well. Because, you know, in my short time as a wrestler, I got the chance to wrestle in different places, and it was when I was starting to get, you know, booked in other places, and I was seeing how different companies approach things differently, and, you know, that's when I was just picking up little things, going, well, that was really well done, or that was really cool, that was dead perfect. I've not seen that done before, and that was quite smart. In terms of how they treated people, you know, even basic things like just having food and water backstage for your wrestlers and your staff. You know, a lot of places you go, they don't do that. You know, you're just kind of, you turn up, you get told when you're on, what's happening, and then you have to go and find food and water for yourself. You know, disappear to a shop or whatnot, and so just little things that don't happen everywhere, but make a big difference to the environment and, you know, for people when they're there. So again, it's just though, it is just little things, you know.
Yeah, it's the small details
that sometimes you find it's amazing that isn't happening everywhere, but makes a big difference for the wrestlers who are there, because then they do go away going, I was looked after.
Yeah, I mean, just from being a human being, I mean, if somebody doesn't provide you, if you're going to wrestle, you know, you're going to get a good sweat on the time you warm up and wrestle, and they haven't given you water, like in my head, I'd be going, well, they don't really care about me. Which is just not a nice place to, you know, just before you even go and wrestle, you go, well, they don't really care about me, or they would have given me water.
And like I say, it doesn't take much to
No.
to provide that, and then even just having a spread backstage of just fruit and snacks, you know, just something, you know, you're not providing a big 3-course meal for folks. You're just going, right, there's some fruit and snacks, enough for everybody. If they're needing something, there's water. There's, you know, people know what time to arrive. People know what time they're on, what's happening. You know, people have like safe ways of getting to and from the venue. Just all of that kind of stuff. It all adds up to people going, well, that was professional. That was, you know, that's if I was still wrestling, that's how I would expect to kind of be treated or looked after. So it is that, you know, treat people how you would expect to be treated yourself, or how you'd like to be treated yourself.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of things in there, just in what you said, Alan. So, do you take and your own production? Do you, just because you mentioned like visuals, is that something that you take kind of great detail in to make things look nice in terms of the fans and the wrestlers? Is that something that you take a bit of pride in? And
well, everything, every little detail, you take pride in, because you don't want anyone to have a bad experience when they're there. Not one person, because that kind of, I'm really obsessive when it comes to doing things a certain way at disco. I'm really obsessive about details, and if I'm after the show, I'll run about all day helping build stuff and making sure people are knowing what they're doing. And people will see me before an event just running and running and running. So most exercise I get is just like running about the events, making sure everything's been done in a certain way. And I'm knackered after an event. Like I feel like I've been in a match, because I feel sore. Because I'm so tense, and I'm so and if I'm sitting there after an event, everyone's gone home, and I'm finally having a pint or something, you know, just sitting down, just right, okay, the event's over. I'll be watching social media, you know, and everybody's kind of responses to it. And if I see one person, you know, there could be 100 tweets all saying what a great time, amazing, buzzing. If I see one tweet going, it was great, but something, or I didn't get the seat I was supposed to have, or I didn't get a great view because of someone was in my way, or there was people at the barrier and I couldn't see. If I see like one comment, I obsess over it, and I get myself, I'm like, God, you know, I kick myself, because you don't want one person walking away going, well, that was rubbish, or I didn't get what I paid for, or and that kind of eats at you, because you are obsessive, and you do have a great deal of pride about what you do and the events you put on, and you want it to be perfect. I'm not saying that our events are perfect, obviously not, but you want it to be as close to perfection as possible.
Strive for perfection and hit greatness. It's that kind of quote that gets bandied about a lot, isn't it? So, and I know, and you know, I've as I've said on this, I've been to a few disco events, and the first time we went, there is that doubt in your head, because you are going to an independent. I've been to a few independent shows from other promotions, as well as WWE, TNA when they've been over. And Logan was desperate to go along and see it. He'd kind of seen it on Facebook, and I was like, "Oh, we'll go along. You know, we'll see what it's like." And you know, you go along, set your expectations at maybe a 4, and you think, well, you know, and genuinely, the pair of us came out beaming with smiles. It was, and every time we've been, it's been like that. And obviously, like you say, when the reputation builds up, now we're like like Logan was saying the other day, when do you think disco wrestling's going to come back? And I was like, we'll have to wait in the lockdown. There's loads of things, but once it comes back, we'll definitely be back. So I think that's it's, from a punter's point of view, it's definitely came across that you do put a lot of care and attention into everything, and it has been great events every time I've been.
Yeah. Well, that's what we strive for, is because we know, you know, like any sort of business, you rely on people coming back. You rely on people coming back. If you want to grow your support, grow your base, then you need people to come back and then bring people with them. You know, so if there's ever an event that takes a dip, or if there's an event that things just weren't as professional as what they normally are, or not as entertaining as they normally are, then people will kind of go, well, they had a good couple of shows, that's them now, and they're kind of way down. I'm not spending money on this again. So you do have to try and maintain standards and try and keep things fresh for people, and just try to keep people coming back, because that's, at the end of the day, if there are no fans, there is no business.
Yeah.
That's
do you have other people that give you input into the show and stuff as well, Alan? You know, like generally after a show, say this, we could tweak this, we could tweak that. That was great. Maybe this wasn't so good. You have guys that do that for help.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a small creative team. There's myself and there's our two commentators. You know, because obviously they're watching like that event the whole time and taking everything in, and while they're calling the action. So we talk quite a lot about ideas and about what worked well, what perhaps didn't work as well as what we hoped. And you know, we speak to, you know, after the event, I'll go around and I'll speak with all the wrestlers who were involved and make sure everything was okay for them, and you know, and sometimes they'll have maybe a little bit of feedback, especially wrestlers who've kind of world traveled and have been in with some of the biggest companies in the world. They'll sometimes have a bit of feedback to say, yeah, maybe you should look at this, or have you ever thought about this? And you just pick up things from them. You know, you're at the end of the day, I've now been involved in wrestling for only 11 years, you know, and we're working with wrestlers who've been wrestling for 20, 30 years, so who've seen and done it, and so you'd be silly not to kind of ask for their feedback, ask for their, you know, take on board what they say.
We were talking about similar stuff a couple of podcasts ago. We were talking about that institutional knowledge that people have, that once it's gone, it's gone. So as you say, it'd be daft to not lean on that and get as much from it. And okay, some of it's maybe never going to be possible, but again, you could adapt it to the circumstances and make it work for you.
I mean, we've just got to. It's kind of doing what you think is possible, or what you think is right for your promotion. I mean, certainly there'll be times when people suggest something that, it's a good idea, but you know yourself it's not going to work for what you do or where you're trying to take things. But when there is that, if there is someone who has been there and done it, then if they suggest something, listen to it. You don't have to do it, obviously, but listen. So
is there a different, you know, if you're going into like the Corn Exchange, for example, which is a big venue, do you change the way you do things? Is there a different approach to that?
There's certainly a lot more nerves. I remember like our goal when we first started was to sell out the main hall of the Corn Exchange within 5 years, and we did it within 3. And it's just there's a lot when you're taking on a big venue like that. There's obviously a lot more work has to go into it in terms of obviously the building of the set. If you're putting on bigger screens and the lighting rigs and whatever else, you need to bring in people to do that. You need to do a lot more work to pull people in to that event, because you're going from being really happy getting 250 people in the Jam House to then trying to get 1,000 people into the Corn Exchange. So there has to be a lot more work goes into that. A lot of that obviously helps if you're doing a bigger venue, that allows you a bit more freedom to try and pull in a much bigger name, because it kind of works in that way. If you get a much bigger name, they're going to draw the people in. So you know, when we've done the main hall of the Corn Exchange, that's when we've had like Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Dalton Castle, Victoria. You know, having folk like that on board at events helps to draw that crowd in. But certainly there's a lot more work, and it's the kind of risk and reward factor, isn't it? Sometimes the greatest risks are the ones that come with the greatest rewards. And then that's anytime you take on, a venue which is out your comfort zone, then the stress levels rise, and you have to put in a heap load more work to make it work.
Yeah.
What's the dream venue in Edinburgh?
Well, we started out just thinking Corn Exchange because Edinburgh's not really blessed for having like iconic big venues. It's strange when we're looking for venues to run in Edinburgh. You're kind of limited to just a few. One stupidly ridiculous dream, which will never ever happen in a million years. But have you ever seen when the tattoos on Edinburgh Castle?
I wonder if you could just before you go into that. Years, but this is going back like 10, 15 years. Me and a group of mates used to run like Chris is going to laugh at this because he's never heard this story before, but we used to run a bit of a fantasy wrestling fed through like websites, and it was called the SFWF, Scottish Fantasy Wrestling Federation, and our equivalent to WrestleMania was always on the Castle Esplanade.
Well, that's it.
With the stands, and we used to my entrance because my character was the champ at the time. Shawn Michaels WrestleMania 12. Where he came down on the rope. I came from, where the Piper stands at all the way down onto the rest. I'm so delighted you've said that.
Well, it's amazing. It's because I've seen it with the stands up for the tattoo, and it feels like a major stadium, but it's on the backdrop of Edinburgh Castle, and you're just thinking, man, would there be anywhere more spectacular than this in Edinburgh? I couldn't think of anywhere more spectacular. But you're looking at 10,000 people perhaps sitting in those stands around there.
I'll come. I think it's one of those things. I think if there was a way to make that happen, I think people would want to wrestle on that event purely because of where it is.
Yeah. But it's like how would you like? I wouldn't even like to hazard a guess at how much that would cost to put on an event in that space. You would maybe have to do it at a time when it was already kind of set up for the tattoo, and you can go right. See, in the days when it's not being used by the military, can we just build a ring right in the middle? And
you've told this to the absolute wrong people, because I will probably message you now once a month just saying, when does wrestling event happen? Yeah, make it happen. Go, do it.
Yeah, I mean that would be that's dream stuff. That's just if I win the if I win the Euro Millions, like one of those stupidly big £120 million, then you go, right, how am I going to celebrate my Euro Millions when, you know what, I'm going to do a free event on this playing at Edinburgh Castle.
Why don't you inquire and see how much it is?
I know.
I couldn't. I just the cost of building those stands alone.
I know it must be expensive. I'm even willing to give you the SFWF name for it if you do it, Alan. I think you stole it from WCW. Capital Carnage.
What was your wrestler name?
I was the Flying Scotsman. Highland original. And my mate Cogs, Graham, shout out to Cogs who's possibly listening. He was Big Nasty because he's about 6'5" in the real world, and at the time was about 280. His brother was FYM, and they were a tag team, the Brothers of Destruction, obviously. We had my laddies appeared at the time, and they must have been about 5 or 6, but I called them, they were a tag team called the Edge Runners, and it was Andre Michaels and Randy Jannetty from Andre the Giant.
Oh man!
You can have all this for free, by the way. I don't mind.
I've taken a note of all of this, so when I'm looking for gimmick ideas for folk, I'm just there.
Oh man, that's amazing. That's one of those things, man. That would be cool. I think. I think you should at least send an email.
Yeah, it is dream stuff. I mean, I can't think of anywhere else in Edinburgh that, obviously we do the Jam House regularly. We do Edinburgh Corn Exchange. There are a couple of other venues that we're in talks with to try and do something when they eventually open up. We used to do events in Portobello Town Hall. I loved the old Town Hall feel, but that's had to close. It was going to be closed to repairs now. I don't know if that'll ever reopen. So we're kind of stuck. We're kind of really limited into the venues we can use that meet the council's kind of licensing conditions as well, and that are suitable to be able to fit a ring in and fit a few hundred folk in. So Edinburgh's really limited in terms of those types of venues. But the Castle Esplanade would be.
There's always a way, man. There's always a way. I'm not gonna let you away with this. There's always a way to make it happen. Always a way.
We'll make it happen. We'll definitely get it.
I'll even turn up with some spanners to help put the stands up to
of
help lower costs.
That's kind of
We'll dig it for you. We'll dig it for you. Talking about promotion, and you're saying like how much it would get, to get 10,000 people in that Esplanade. Are you still just doing your promotion just solely through social media for Disco, or have you? Because I know at the start, I could be wrong in this, but I think you kind of did it as the most, let's say, economical option rather than the old flyers, posters. Is it still the majority on social media, or have you kind of started to branch a little bit? Or
well, everybody kind of has their own way of promoting their own promotions, and it's just finding the groove of kind of what works for you and what works for your business best. I mean, we did, our first event, posters were up everywhere. We did some advertising on radio. We did, that type of stuff. And while it worked, it wasn't the most kind of cost effective way of doing things. And then when we were first starting, going back 6 years, yes, social media was about, but in terms of the advertising and the marketing through social media, it was just something that was kind of alien to us. But now, having done the events that we've been doing them, we know that if I announce that we're coming back, say it is November, and we go, right, tickets are on sale tomorrow, I know I'm going to have the same group of fans that'll buy it before anything's announced. And again, that goes back to that thing about reputation and people always getting what they paid for. So they know they can trust us and they put faith in us. If we go, right, there's going to be a show on this date, we're putting tickets on sale tomorrow, we're not going to announce a thing. People will go, I know I'm going to have a great time, I'm going to buy a ticket. So it kind of takes, so if you're looking at a venue that holds 250, 300 people, you announce something without, and you put an event on without announcing anyone. I know there's going to be the same 150 folk that will be there. So that only leaves you with a small amount of room to fill from folk who might only come every once in a while or new fans. So we really target everything through social media, Facebook advertising, great promotion from our wrestlers on Twitter and things, and at least that way we don't do as much in the way of kind of poster and flyering as perhaps what we did when we started. That was really needed when we started to try and get the word out for people who don't follow us on Facebook or Twitter. But we everything is so focused now on social media for us that actually, the flyering and postering side, it never really had that impact for us. We tried certain ways to try and make it work. With flyering, there was a few events there when we tried a little thing with flyering where it was a case of, we put, if you bring this flyer with you, you'll get 20% off the door price. And so we could see out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of flyers we had distributed around folks' doors and whatever, how many of these flyers actually came back. And thousands of flyers go out and maybe about 5 or 6 came back, and you're thinking, well, it's not really had an impact for us. So we've tried different things, and we just find that social media is the most cost effective and direct way of reaching people.
Yeah. Do you think that's down to the old Generation Y, where the Y division name comes from? Do you think an element of that?
Yeah, I mean, because we did. I mean, when we launched, it was under the banner of Generation Y, and people who've kind of grown up with technology and social media and things, and really, from being at events that it is suitable for the whole family. I mean, there'll be stuff in there which only the adults will get. Some of the one-liners from some of the guys involved. And some of the entertainment sometimes is on the border line of what is acceptable for a family audience, but it never crosses that line. And we always started out with a vision of this being a kind of promotion that's more so suited for people who are 14 and older. And at the time when we launched, the age of 14 would have been the start of the Generation Y. And so that was kind of the feeling. But we also wanted, we know that younger kids, they'll love wrestling no matter what. If it's good guy, bad guy, they'll pick someone to cheer for and someone to boo. Whereas we didn't want to dumb wrestling down to be just a cartoon. We wanted it to be something that keeps the adults engaged. And actually what we find, and you'll have seen it from your events, is while yes, we're a family-friendly promotion, the majority of people in the crowd are adults.
Yeah.
We don't actually get that many kids that come along to our events. We do get children that come along to our events, but it's the vast majority of people in the crowd are adults, and it's family-friendly entertainment.
Totally. And as I say, Logan was 14, I think. I'm sure he was 14 thinking about the dates when he first came along, and he felt totally cool with it. Like, he was probably at the age where he maybe picked up on, say, I'll say as a dad, 70% of the double entendres. He maybe picked up a little bit more. But he was starting to get into it, and kind of bought into the whole atmosphere, which is why we've been back, several times now, and 100% will be back. Even, if you hadn't been on our podcast, we'd still be coming back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's good to know. It's good to hear. But yeah, no, it's just about having wrestling that's kind of accessible for all ages. That that's not going to drive adults away because it's too silly, or it's not going to drive kids away because they don't. There's no characters there to boo and cheer. So it's trying to find the mix. It's like, so many people have described wrestling as being like the three-ring circus. It's like you go to the circus, you might not like the clown, but you like the guy in the tightrope. You don't like the guy in the tightrope, you're going to like the juggler. Or, there's always going to be something there that you're going to really like. There might be elements that you're not really into as much, but there's still going to be stuff that you do like.
Yeah. So, when there's another show, I might bring my nephew. My nephew's he likes wrestling, so good. I might come with Ali and we might come and watch a show, whether it's this year or next year. But now we're kind of approaching an hour, so what I want to say is, what's your favourite wrestling moments?
From disco or from any time?
Anything. You're the guest. God. You can say what you want.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'll always be biased towards what we do in disco because I've got a great hand in pulling it all together. When the first time we did Edinburgh Con Exchange, when we had Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, the first time we'd ever gone to try and get the main hall of the Con Exchange, and being on a Wednesday night and getting 1,000 people out on a Wednesday night, it was massively kind of proud moment. And so that is one of my moments. In terms of being a fan, God, I'm going back some now. I remember the first time I ever went to see wrestling live, when I was about 7 years old, and I was living in Forfar, and I went to a place called the Reed Hall in Forfar, and the headline act was Giant Haystacks, and I was sitting front row with my friends, and I still remember it clearly. Yeah, it was 30 years ago, but I still remember it clearly, sitting in that front row, and then here comes Giant Haystacks. For anyone who hasn't seen Giant Haystacks, Google him. He's huge, a monster of a man, one of the biggest ever names from British wrestling, up there with Big Daddy. But Giant Haystacks, here he comes, walking around the ring. He's got this rope for a belt, and he walks past me and my friends, and we're all going, "You're fat. You're fat, you're fat." And of course he knows he's fat, He's wearing a rope for a belt. He knows he's fat, but we're still pointing out to him, "You're fat." And he just stopped, and you look down at us. There's a group of about 4 or 5 of us, and he just spat on us. Just spat on us, front row. We're kids who are like 6, 7 years old, and Giant Haystacks just stops and spits on us. And that was me hooked. That was me. I was just like, yeah, wrestling's for me. I'm into this. Yeah. So I think for me, that's one of my earliest memories of wrestling, but it's still one of the most, powerful kind of memories of wrestling. Just my first ever live experience of wrestling, and just loving it.
It's true what they say. You never forget the first time a giant man spits on you. Oh dear, Giant Haystacks spitting on you. Brilliant. Yeah, I've never been to a wrestling show. So we used to obviously watching wrestling every week when we were kids, but
I
yeah,
don't
never
think
been to a
there's anything
show.
like there's anything like experiencing it, firsthand. I think,
Yeah.
watching it on TV, especially when you're watching things like WrestleMania and these big events, which are big showpieces, and some of the matches you see. But I think the beauty of coming along to an event, especially some of the kind of the mid-sized kind of smaller events, is just being able to hear everything as well as being very close to seeing it, and feeling the energy in the room with the crowd as well. It makes everything, just on some of the times when I've sat there, and I usually find that I'm usually sitting in the sound booth of the events, just pushing all the buttons and whatnot. But I'm hearing these moves, and these moves connect, whether it be chops or whether it be kicks, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh my god!" I know what wrestling is, but at the same time, some of these shots, you're just going, "Holy cow!" And when the crowd are kind of reacting to it as well, I don't think there's anything like experiencing wrestling live. And we do get a lot of people who go, they'll bring along their son, their nephew, their grandkid, and they're going for their sake. They're just going, right, I'm just going because the kid wants to go. And at the end of it, they're going, I love that. Themselves, they want to come back.
That was kind of where I was the first time I came to disco. I was like, Logan was desperate to go. I was like, I'm a big wrestling fan. I'll sit and watch it. It'll be what it is. After about 3 matches, I'm like, disco. Like, totally about it. Crazy.
Buying T-shirts and foam fingers and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true what you say about those moments, though, because, again, talk about Logan. The first show he ever went to was a TNA taping over at the Hydro about 5-6 years ago, and I'd managed as part of his birthday to get him like meet and greet passes. So he'd met loads of the wrestlers beforehand, and then there was a table match between Eric Young and Abyss.
Right, okay.
And as we were dragging the broken table up the ramp back to the Gorilla, a bit of the table fell off, just a piece about yay size, about 4 inches square, and the guy just picked up and handed it to Logan. So Logan had the table from the match, and he's still got it. He's got it in a wee case. And then about 18 months after that, we went to a WWE show at the Hydro again. And Logan had said, I wish you could have got me meet and greets for the WWE. I says, look, it just wasn't an option. The cost was too much.
Yeah.
We just couldn't afford it. He's like, I just love to really meet some of the wrestlers. Didn't get me wrong, so would I, pal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We came out the train station, Queen Street, because it was over in Glasgow, walked out the train station, turned left onto Buchanan Street, and bumped into Cody Rhodes.
Oh, brilliant.
So Logan got a picture with Cody Rhodes, which then, when Cody turned up at disco with Skrull and that, I had the picture printed off and got Cody to sign up for Logan.
Oh, magic. Yeah.
And they were all like, who's the kid in the photo? Because Logan, by this point, when we met him the first time, he was like 10 years old, and now he's like, at the time, like 14, so it hit a wee bit of a growth spurt, and they were all chatting to him. And it's moments like that, like I was just stood back watching Logan interacting with Cody Rhodes, who is his absolute hero in wrestling. And
that's great. Yeah.
Cody and Marty and the Young Bucks talking to Logan like a young guy rather than a kid, you know what I mean? Like giving him a bit of a rib, and that's not, look at that hair, look at that cute smile, and now look at you're all teenage and awkward, and Logan stood there like laughing, and
and that'll stick with Logan as well. That'll stick with him.
100%
stick with him for life.
Yeah, it was totally cool. And as I say, as a dad looking at that from the distance, it was, do you know what I mean? It kind of gets you a wee bit smoky. You're a bit like, whoa. Yeah, what was that? Someone, we bit of dust in there or something.
I definitely think I'd rather take a little bit of a slagging for my hair than get spat on. I think I'd definitely prefer that.
Yeah, well, I think if you come to a disco event, you won't be spat on. I can guarantee that. I can't see anything with the hair, but definitely no spit on you. That's a unique selling point. Come to Discovery, the wrestlers won't spit on you.
I know.
To be fair, you should probably put that online.
Yeah.
You won't be spat on.
Put on the TikToks. Guarantee. Be spat on.
Man.
Well,
Well, guys, I have to run.
We're heading on towards
I'm gonna have to go for a little run.
If people want to find out more about yourself or disco, where can they find you? How can they look you up? Where's the best place to go? And we'll put this in the notes as well. Yeah, Facebook and Twitter are by far the easiest places to get us. Discovery Wrestle, facebook.com/Discovery Wrestling. And on Twitter, it's @Disco Wrestling.
That's the best and easiest places to find us. We've also got a website, discowrestling.com, where you can find all our merchandise.
That's one thing I was going to ask you, actually. I seen you had, I was on the Facebook page earlier on. Do you still have T-shirts in stock?
Yeah. So that's all. They're all available online, all made to order. So, which has been one of the big things about not having events. Having to find other ways to kind of keep ourselves going to pay the bills and things. And fans have been tremendous in how they've responded to us and helping us get through this, whether it be online raffles or the merchandise. So. For fans who may be listening to this, we'll forever be in their debt for helping us get through this time.
Yeah, I'll go and order a T-shirt as soon as we get off the call.
Smashing.
I think it's cool to I think, especially with Scottish people, I think we should all support each other and help each other out. So I'll go and order one of those as soon as I get off here.
Tremendous. Yeah, no, we appreciate that, and hopefully we'll see you at an event once we get back at some point.
Definitely.
100% you will. So, episode 29, Alan Smith, co-owner and founder of Discovery Wrestling. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers, Alan.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.